It's time to talk about resistance to apartheid. We've learned about apartheid, its racist policies, how it kept all the races separate, and especially put down blacks in South Africa. Well, I wanted to talk briefly about something I mentioned last week, which is the formation in 1912 of the African National Congress, the ANC, which still exists through to today. It was formed in 1912 with the aim of fighting for the rights of black South Africans, especially trying to get voting rights, which black South Africans don't get until the 1990s. It's a long, long struggle. It practiced nonviolence at first, but then after 1960, with the Sharpeville massacre, it became more aggressive, and that is to say violent, leading to being banned by the Afrikaner white government. The ANCYL is a branch of the ANC. It stands for African National Congress Youth League, and it was the more youthful wing of the ANC formed in 1944, called for for civil disobedience and strikes and protest at hundreds of laws associated with the apartheid system. There are many parallels to the events in the American civil rights movement and what's taking place in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. I think it's safe to say that the American equivalent of Nelson Mandela in some regards would be Martin Luther King Jr. Both were major leaders. Of course, Mandela serves 27 years in prison. Martin Luther King does spend some small periods in prison. But anyway, the ANCYL protests often were met with force by the South African government. One of its main leaders was Nelson Mandela, who's pictured as a young man there. Just a few words about Mandela. We're going to be focusing more on Mandela in the next couple of days. But Mandela was a really important character. There he is as a young boy and as a younger man. Born in a tiny village, he was adopted by a local chief at the age of 12 after his biological father died. Studied law. He joined the ANC and co-founded the ANCYL, which I just mentioned on the previous slide. He helped develop the program of action, which called on the ANC to embark on mass action involving civil disobedience, strikes, boycotts, and other forms of nonviolent resistance, very similar to the American civil rights movement. Nonviolence, you protest against unjust laws in a way that makes it clear that you're not willing to tolerate those injustices, but and you are even breaking laws that you consider to be unjust, but you're doing it in a non-violent way. This was the main practice of Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. He helped develop the Defiance Campaign, the first large-scale multiracial political mobilization against apartheid laws after the Sharpeville massacre. Created the Spear of the Nation, Umkhonto we Sizwe is what it's called in South African language, a militaristic guerrilla faction of the ANC. So the Defiance Campaign of 1952, started in 52, focused primarily on fighting past laws, the fact that South African blacks and coloreds and Asians were required to carry passes everywhere they went. And the Defiance Campaign tried to fight against that practice. I'll show you a little piece of video right
here. We made USAA insurance for veterans like Kate. When she got a new car for bigger projects, she quickly updated her policy on the USAA app and said, done. USAA, what you're made of, we're made for. USAA.
We will fight for our freedom.
This is Mandela speaking. Not the real person, this is a movie.
We will keep them in war. Hallelujah! In Africa! Hallelujah! In Africa!
So they're going to rush into a train station and go into the white-only areas of the train. This is the kind of thing that they did. Europeans only.
What do you think you're doing? See, lady, no manners at all. Let go of me. Put your hands up. Come on. Sorry, Dex.
So that's the idea, defiance against unjust laws. And that was the Defiance Campaign.
I have beautiful children, a beautiful wife. I want them to walk free in their own.
So that's the Defiance Campaign. And there again you see black South Africans in the white-only areas of trains. The Freedom Charter of 1955 gave the goals and values of the anti-apartheid movement. They targeted police harassment, and they became the target of police harassment. And many of their leaders were arrested and charged with treason. And the treason trial went on from 1956 to 59. The government tried but failed to proclaim that the Freedom Charter was treasonous in the so-called treason trial. And these are some of the tenets of the treason trial the Freedom Charter. People shall govern, all national groups shall have equal rights, the people shall share in the country's wealth, the land shall be shared among those who work it. Things like this. All shall be equal before the law. Now, another small piece of video on the Sharpeville massacre. We'll show that first and then we'll talk about it.
Thousands gather outside a police station in protest against new laws requiring every African to carry a pass at all times.
Bastards ignored the fight! Das not a word came from my very well. Why
Zijn we het gewoon vermoord? Die schroepelijk is die zo.
Luister, ek vra nou wat 2 ure, nog luister van die the cells are full!
How long is it going to take?
Burning the passes. The passbook. That's Mandela burning his passbook.
The authority of a state that makes war on its own people.
So the Sharpeville massacre was basically a group called the Pan-Africanist Congress organized these protests against pass laws. The people gathered in the hundreds at this police station in Sharpeville, South Africa in 1960. And as you can see in the clip, They opened fire and 69 people were shot and killed, hundreds wounded. Soon both the Pan-Africanist Congress and the ANC were banned, forbidden all contact with other organizations or persons, forbidden to engage in political, social, or community organizing. After the Sharpeville massacre, things got a lot more aggressive. In 1961, an ANC military organization underground was called Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation. Nelson Mandela was its head. It was formed to carry out acts of sabotage. Sabotage meaning blowing up things, disrupting things, causing basically violent resistance as part of the campaign against apartheid. So the movement goes violent, basically. Mandela and other ANC leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment in 1964 as a result of the Rivonia trial, and they were thrown into prison for life for conspiring to overthrow the state, the government of the apartheid system, of the Afrikaner system. Here's a famous Nelson Mandela quote as he was heading into a 27-year prison term. "I have fought against white domination and I have fought against black domination. I cherish the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Famous words by Nelson Mandela. I also want to mention the other towering character, not as big as Mandela perhaps, but still very big, named Steve Biko, Bantu Steve Biko. Biko was the leader of what came to be called the Black Consciousness Movement. And this was basically the next big movement following the banishment of ANC and PAC leaders. And the Black Consciousness Movement basically tried to say that we're going to reject apartheid as Black South Africans, and that Black in South Africa must have pride in their culture and rely on themselves and end their dependence on whites. It taught that Blacks must unite and work together to end apartheid. The famous phrase was "Black is beautiful," both in the United States as well as in South Africa. It organized trade unions in defiance of anti-strike laws and basically emphasized pride in being Black. Biko was banned in 1973 and detained without trial in 1976 and murdered, brutally beaten by police in prison at the age of 30 in 1977, a true martyr for his cause. The final thing I want to mention here is the Soweto uprising, which was inspired by the Black Consciousness movement. In reaction to a law requiring that courses be taught in Afrikaans, the Dutch-based language of the white Afrikaners, it was seen by Black South Africans as the language of the oppressor, and a massive protest of 20,000 students erupted in the Soweto suburb of Johannesburg, a major city in South Africa. Police would end up opening fire on the protesters and killing up to 700 youths. Unrest swept the entire country, a huge challenge to the apartheid system. It also brought huge international condemnation. Although the system would continue for more than a decade, the uprising marked a turning point, the beginning of the end of the apartheid system. Here's pictures from the Soweto uprising. Very famous picture, and I'm going to ask you to watch a piece of video today based on this picture that you see right here. Okay, that's it for now.